Welcome to another edition of This Week, 60 minutes of analytical review of the big stories, topical issues, and all the controversies around the world. I'm Somna Sambu. Coming up, the restructuring debate in Nigeria continues as 2023 approaches. The chieftain of the All Progressives Congress, Chief Olusegun Osoba, says there's a gentleman's agreement that the South will produce Nigeria's next president. And Nigeria's government directs a reversal of electricity tariff adjustment, which was earlier increased by 50%. Plus, Donald Trump could be the first U.S. president to be impeached twice as Democrats prepare action against him after the Capitol Hill riots. It comes as Twitter silences the president by banning him from the platform. We begin with the issue of restructuring, where a former governor of Ogun State and chieftain of the All Progressives Congress, Chief Olusegun Osoba, joined the fray in the raging debate in the party over whether or not the presidency should return to the South after the two-term tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari ends in 2023. Speaking during the week on the morning show, he said a gentleman's agreement during the 2013 merger talks that the presidency and chairmanship of the APC will rotate between the South and the North.
My honest opinion is this. I was the chairman of the Constitutional Drafting Committee of the APC merger. We of the ACN, we were the dominant group from the South. And the Southwest is the home and the root of progressive politicking. Part of the understanding in the case of rotation is a conventional understanding that the presidency will move between the North and the South. That was the reason why we now allow the chairman, I don't want to use the word zoning, because we definitely did not put zoning in our constitution because we know it may go into conflict with the Nigerian constitution, which says that anybody who is a Nigerian who has read up to West African school certificate can contest, and at the age of 35, I think, for the presidency of the country. But there was a very clear, gentlemanly understanding that the northern part of the country will produce the president when we did the merger in 2013. And the chairman of the party would then come from the South. We have had a president for 8 years, for 6.5 years now, from the North in APC. The president will be there for 8 years until 2023. The chairmanship has moved from Chief Bisi Akande in Southwest to John Oyegun from South-South, and then from Governor John Oyegun to Governor Adams Oshiomhole, also from South-South. Of course, at the end of the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari, the gentlemanly arrangement is that the presidency will come to the South And I talk of the South in terms of the two countries or territory that were forced to amalgamate in 1914, which means the South-South, the Southeast, and the Southwest zones, which are also not in the Constitution, can bid and should be allowed to produce the next president for this country.
Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, who's a Rise News analyst, and joining us via Cisco WebEx is Osita Okechukwu, the Director General of Voice of Nigeria and an APC stalwart who's joining us from Enugu. Good to have you. Let's start with you, Prof. I mean, we had to take this long, talk from Chief Osoba to actually lay this foundation very well on what he has said. And it's at the heart of the issues at the APC right now, where the party doesn't know how it's going to play this out. Now, there are some people who are saying that the next chairman of the party should come from the north, while some people are insisting that the next chairman of the party should still come from the south, so that he or she will end the tenure of the ousted chairman, Oshomole and all of that. What are your thoughts? Because whoever they will decide to put up as chairman will give the signal as to where the presidential ticket of the party may be coming from.
Yeah, somewhat. But I think it's important for us to provide what looks like a kind of background. You know, we keep talking about this zoning, this allocation of positions because of the nature of our system. Nigeria is a plural, multi-ethnic, multi-regional state, and in that kind of fragile system that is still relatively primitive, where the structures, the institutions are weak, you know, you have to give continuously every section, you know, a sense of belonging, you know, compliant or consistent with the long-term agitation for longing. You know, longing comes over a long period of time. So against that background, you have to give them that sense of belonging so that they will feel a sense of integration and involvement. Okay, so this conversation has continued over the years, and it is further to that conversation that we are having this debate, you know, around the APC. So having established that, it's also important to also say that, you know, you could see now without any, you know, any major pronouncement coming from the party hierarchy, you know, there's a kind of agitation from the southern part of the country, you know, for them to have the next presidency. And we are having more agitation from the south on the platform of the APC more than we are having from the north. So the signal is that there's this unwritten rule, again, along the line of the argument of the reputable Maremo Olusegun Osoba, you know, that there's this gentleman agreement. The gentleman agreement is probably not even original to APC. You know, it was an agreement, you know, perhaps that we can say PDP bathed it, you know, into the dawn of democracy in 1999. So it's also salutary that APC also continuing with it in the interest of belonging. You know, but how do we now reconcile it? I want to believe that APC is a very mature party. Yes, it was a rainbow coalition in the first instance, but they are coming gradually together and it's becoming a little more solid. So going into 2023, I see them resolving this thing, you know, but it doesn't really matter where the next chairman comes, because, you know, there's still a vacuum created by the by the fact that the tenure of Oshomole was cut short. So that vacuum can be filled with someone from the south, and when the chips are now perhaps ahead of the convention for the selection of the 2023 presidential candidate on the aegis of the APC, then we can have another chairman coming from the north and the presidential candidate probably coming from the south. That's one scenario. The scenario is also okay. It's okay. The other scenario is to also say that, well, we are growing as a nation. Our democracy is nearly 23 years old. So why should we continue to bother about, you know, pandering to power rotation? Why don't we privilege merits? That's another scenario. It can happen. And if the best person will probably come from the north after President Buhari, why can't we have that person? You know, but again, it all depends on what comes up. 2023 is still far away, you know, given how fluid, how amoebic, political calculations can be. So many things can still happen.
All
But
right.
we cannot make
there.
pointers anyway, given what is snowballing.
Let's see if we have Osita Okechukwu now. All right, I've been told that we do not still have him now.
Okay.
He will still be joining us.
Yeah.
But let's talk about how, Amoebic, like you have said, these political calculations can look like.
Yeah.
And a lot of northern politicians say that southern politicians are always calling for meritocracy, and that there is, since it's not outright written in the constitution of the APC that there should be this power rotation, it should be thrown open for the best candidate, the best candidate who's able to woo voters to actually emerge, irrespective of whether it's from north or south and all of that. What do you make of
I think it's also important for us to note that this question of making that definitive pronouncement, sometimes it doesn't really hold water, I remember ahead of the 1999 presidential election, yes, there was this unwritten rule that a written arrangement that the Southwest or the South, for instance, should produce the next president. But we also had other candidates from the PDP from other sections of the country also contesting.
Yeah, we had Abubakar.
Yes, we had it also in
2003. Also,
we always had. So we always have this arrangement, but we know how political processes take place. It's such that it is not about pronouncement. It's not about definitive, instruction from the party hierarchy. It's also about, who controls some kind of machinery, who controls the mechanism, for the determination of the power relations, that will come up along those lines. And what are those instruments? Of course, war chess is part of it. Then your political network across the country is also part of it. Then, of course, there's also the powerful element of the voters themselves. Sometimes we think that they are illiterate, they are ignorant, they do not know what to do. But of course, we know that they can be very conscious when political season come to the fore, like we saw in 2015 and in 2019, in the case of their almost cult-like support and belief in President Muhammad Buhari, irrespective of his imperfections, that the opposition, highlighted ahead of the elections. So some of these interest groups also matter, and all of them will actually come to the fore in the determination of what will who eventually win at the end of the day. Whether or not it's going to be go to the north or to the south, to the southwest or the southeast, or back to the south, nobody can really tell, But again, it's a matter of time, but it's also instructive, very exciting for us to be talking about it now, and for us to see horse trading, networking, permutation, calculation going on. It's also part of the process. But one thing that is also important, Somna, is that we do not want these political processes, to overshadow the more important business of statecraft. Because good governance is also important while we are politicking, irrespective of the fact that we cannot really undermine the fact of politics, because politics determine largely every other sector of the society.
Yeah, the critical decision making.
That's right, yeah.
In running the country. But one of the things that bothers me is that you are an academic, and I want you to speak as an academic here.
I hope I won't disappoint you. Yes, okay.
Well, the thing is that I haven't looked through the political space. I'm finding it difficult to actually see one politician that could actually control the sort of cult-like following that Buhari had, where he had 11 million, 12 million consistently for over 3 election cycles. Have you, in one way or the other, seen that kind of politician that if, for example, the APC opens up its network, or even the PDP too, that person can command between 10 to 15 million votes and emerge without challenges so much?
So now, that's a very brilliant question, I must confess, but there are so many things that come to the play, really, in the determination of followership. And some of these things may look very intangible, but they can be very solid in terms of effects. One is principles, the other one, the consistency in policy on the part of the candidate. Sometimes, again, it can be how welfareist the person can be. How caring can the person be in terms of the distribution of resources, whether legitimately earned or illegitimately earned. People can just believe in you, perhaps for years, you know, after years of sticking to a particular kind of policy, they're able to trust you. All these things, it can happen for different reasons. Sometimes it may even be for other intangibles like your brand, the way you dress, the way you talk, you know, or maybe the kind of people you oppose and the people you don't oppose. And that's why you see, even in regular life, you see people commanding some level of followership despite their maverick,
I hope it's not the kind of
nature.
social media followership that we see.
It's also a kind of followership, and it's also part of the process.
You think that's enough to actually determine the kind of votes that
No, it may not be enough. But I'm just saying that social media followership is also determined by so many things. Look at Dino Melaye, for instance. He has 2.4 million followers. You know, higher than some other persons that you think should have much more than that. Look at Donald Trump, nearly 80 million followers on Twitter. I mean, would you believe that? But of course, some other persons would dismiss him. You know, but if Olusegun has a Twitter handle, for instance, it may not even have up to 1,000. So these are the things that I'm saying that can be determined by some X factor that you may not really be able to fathom. But it's the nature of followers, you know, it's the nature of voters. They are sometimes feeble-minded, they are sometimes fickle-minded. You know, sometimes it's not about how well you sell your policies, how well you sell your principles. It could just be a question of believing
how
you because of some intangibles.
Because those are the things that actually sell within Nigerian polity.
Yeah,
ethnicity, tribalism, and all of that, and how you make caricatures.
But those are very dangerous platforms
I bet
to ride on.
The thing
really,
is that politicians have been using that to win elections here and there. And I'm asking, we've heard names like Tinubu being pushed out, Tambuwa being pushed out. We've also had issues, people like Ahmed Yerima, former governor of Zamfara State, he has said that irrespective of whatever people are saying, he's going to come out to contest. And now we've been seeing lots of politicians also trooping to greet former Kano governor Rabiu Kwankwaso, and one keeps wondering, is it coming out for the presidency or what's going on? You know, he lost his dad recently, and I mean, the political traffic going there has been very high. Now, in all of these names that I've mentioned, including Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, do you think we have someone within that capacity that can command between 5 to 10 or 15 million votes that could actually stand him out? Because this debate is coming, and Nigerians are now being told of those kind of people that can bring out, you know, policies ahead of the election. But people are just clinging on just this north thing or south thing.
Unfortunately,
and once it's zoned, maybe, for example, to the south, they will end up just clinging on that to ride on it instead of selling their policies.
Well, but I think maybe we'll get to that time, you know, but you should know that our political process is not determined by how brilliant you are, you know, how articulate you can be, you know, or how sophisticated your policy directions are. It's more determined by some other extraneous factors like your origin, your ethnicity, and that's what you and I have been talking about in the last couple of minutes. You know, so at the end of the day, it may not be whether this person is an orator or, you know, a good thinker. It could be determined by some other things that are relatively inconsequential. We have had in the last election, 2019 election, a lot of people have argued that the best candidate didn't really emerge, because in terms of understanding of policy, in terms of the appropriate grabbing of the problem with this country, of the issues. Of course, again, you can make the argument that the best person probably didn't emerge. That's the nature of our politics now. You know, it's still determined by some other things, you know, that probably materials, probably ethnic, you know, or some other classifiers, some other things that pluralize us, you know, which is why we're saying that politics is yet to develop. But do not forget again that probably there's no politics that is perfect anywhere in the world. Is all in the process of gestation. You know, what systems try to do is just to perfect it, advance it insofar as there's consistency and there's no interruption that we used to have in the pre-1999 era in this country.
Now, let's talk about this rotation issue. The late Alex Ekweme, former Vice President of Nigeria, during the National Political Reforms Conference in 2005, which he had led, had actually said that Nigeria should consider that issue of rotation of this presidency formally. And then, you know, that's when we brought these geopolitical zones to light and all of that, but they are still not involved in the constitution, just like you heard Chief Osoba actually said. Is it time for us to consider those things, since they keep on propping up, you know, in debates before the election? Should we just make it known, just like he alluded to, that the amalgamation was between the North and the South? Now, to calm political frayed nerves and then to ensure that there's equity in succession plans, should we just introduce this into our constitution?
Now, you see, everything cannot be in the constitution. Just that no law.
But this has been a major issue coming up almost during every election cycle.
We're getting there, but that's why the parties too also have their constitution. And sometimes it's not everything that is constitutional that is really reasonable, or actually ethical or morally practicable. There are certain things that you implement, even though they are not written. That's why we have...
Yeah, but we've seen those unwritten agreements being violated, and that's why you have the likes of Chief Osoba actually complaining that those unwritten agreements, orally done or so, keep being violated.
I also want to believe that the reputable Chief Osoba is probably just trying to prepare us against, perhaps for people not to do certain things that they should ordinarily not do. But if you ask me, from my reading of the political space, I'm seeing more agitation from the president coming from, for the next presidency coming from the south, that I'm seeing from the north, And what it tells me is that, there's this belief, there's this loud belief that it should actually rotate to the south, but which part of the south now will be something that the parties will also have to determine.
Yes, but let's talk about what, for example, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has said during the 2019 general election. Before then, he has said, when he went to Oyo State, he has said that if the Yorubas want to actually succeed in 2023, this is the best time to start planning ahead, and so they should cast their vote for for President Muhammadu Buhari, which they did. And then before then, we had the SGF boss Mustafa in 2018 when they were hosting Southeast leaders, and he had to go and represent President Buhari in the Southeast. And he told them that the best route to 2023 is for them to ensure that Buhari is returned in 2019. And now, if this is coming to the South, for example, do you foresee the South is getting it or the Southwest?
That's a difficult question.
Because this is the same government and two top government officials making two different promises to two regions of the South.
With the greatest respect to them, you expect the typical politician to sometimes talk from both sides of the mouth. Sometimes their pronouncement could just be for immediate gain. And in terms of long-term projections, they fall short. They drop the ball when it comes to that. Regard. So you can pardon them. You can give them that window.
You think there was no synergy between the Buhari's government and campaigners when they were working towards 2019?
No, they can,
because these regions can actually hold, for example, Vice President Osinbajo to his comment. The same thing they can hold. Southeast can hold Boss Mustafa to his comment, and he was representing the president.
Yeah, but all those comments, they were campaign promises. Campaign.
And the campaign promises are meant to be fulfilled.
Indeed. How many politicians anywhere in the world do politicians fulfill campaign promise?
Well, they are actually made because they are meant to be fulfilled.
Yeah, I understand anyway. But sometimes when they make it, it's just for the immediate gain to win election. But when they win election, it's a different ball game. So those promises are sweet, but they are actually speaking to the audience that were ahead, the audiences they were facing at those points in time. I mean, you do not expect them not to say the things that will gratify those audiences. So that's what we're witnessing. But how well they go about implementing it is a different thing.
Yeah, but as an academic, having seen the political history of Nigeria, a lot of people have said that, look, for political stability of the country, the Southeast deserves this. And we've seen lots of Southeast politicians, beginning with Governor Umahi of Ebonyi State, flocking to APC, hopeful that the promises made by people like Boss Mustafa and through the body language of President Muhammadu Buhari, we may have a presidential ticket being given to them. What do you make of these Southeast politicians flocking to the APC? Does this signal that the APC may actually give this ticket to the Southeast?
But generally, they are very sophisticated people, and they represent, a major part of this country in any respect. The great intellectuals, great thinkers, great politicians, and you cannot find them wanting in terms of their contribution to the evolution of this country. Against that background, you will not find qualified people. There's no way you will not find qualified people in their rank come 2023. But again, there are other factors, there are other issues that will come up. Those issues will be around how well, they can command votes, how well they have contributed in the past to the political party that's going to sponsor them, then how well they can muster votes from other parts of the country to support their own cause as well. So many issues will come to the fore. But in terms of competence and quality, they have people who can mount the saddle of presidency are plenty.
And what would you think of people like Tinubu, who actually been there for this party, helping to ensure that President Buhari emerges in 2015 and even in 2019? Do you think Buhari should pay him back in 2023?
That's another great man in terms of how he's been consistent over the years in growing people, in building a network of leaders, and we have seen them performing both at the state and the national level. But again, we have to be careful if we have to narrow down political participation, political activity to cost to investment and reward. I don't want to see his contribution in 2015, probably as something that is preparatory to a future reward. I just believe that he did it out of sheer patriotism, out of shared nationalism.
And you think any politician does that without expecting gains?
Well, having said that, if the group, as the case could be, and the president thinks that maybe a section of the country should mount the saddle, he will have the Southeast to contend with, and beyond that, he will also have other equally competent people from the Southwest to contend with. So it's actually what the House has said, Gafili Gadoki. The field is open. Let's see how it goes.
All right. It's been really nice having you here, Dr. Abiodun. Welcome back. You're still watching This Week on Arise News. U.S. Democrats have laid plans for impeaching President Trump, even as he's headed out of the White House. If the Democrats succeed, Trump will be the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. Efforts to remove him from power followed after the siege of the U.S. Capitol by a pro-Trump mob that shocked the nation and the world. 3 Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee have begun to circulate articles of impeachment, including Ted Lieu of California. Let's take a listen.
We already have the full speech of Donald Trump at the rally where he's inciting the people to attack Congress and the Capitol. We have his repeated statements on social media. We don't need to do a lot of investigation because this is all out in the open. So this is a different case than, for example, what happened with the first impeachment, where you had to try to dig out, well, what did the president say to whom, and what did staff know, and what did Ukrainians know, and so on. This was all out in the open. This was open incitement of people to stop Congress from accepting the certified electoral college results. It was an attempted coup to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from being inaugurated on January 20th. And already less than 48 hours, we have over 150 co-authors of this article of impeachment, and that does show, I think, very strong momentum. We also have the fact that multiple people died in this attempted coup, and it's something we can't just ignore. We can't just pretend that Wednesday didn't happen. This was a direct attack on our democracy, and Congress simply can't just sit by and issue strongly worded press releases as a response. Doing nothing is not an option.
Well, I still have with me here Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, who's a Rise News analyst. Prof, I mean, this must be a very difficult time for Donald Trump, because it looks like his speech before the meeting of Congress to ratify that vote on Wednesday is what this federal lawmaker is actually saying incited the mob that invaded the Capitol, and the Democrats are actually going for blood at this point in time, though he has just about 2 weeks left. What do you make of all of this? Do you think it's possible to either bring up this 25th Amendment or even begin these full impeachment proceedings ahead of January 20?
Well, I think what has happened in the U.S., it's a lesson, for us all in life, that perfection can only be of God. America before now was celebrated as a beacon of democracy, the bastion of democratic excellence, and it was like the height that the average nation wanted to attain in terms of democratic experiment. But we also saw, we've seen how these things has happened. Despite their strong institutions, we have also now learned how individuals, probably perverted individuals, delusional individuals, with alternative reality, how their machinations, how their temper can push institutions, to a very large extent. We've seen it all. But it's also a lesson again that irrespective of perfection, irrespective of the level at which you are, there's still room for improvement. So Americans, have learned a lesson from Donald Trump as president. I know that going forward, they're going to learn lessons too. Perhaps there could be some kind of laws, some kind of bills, that will prevent the emergence of another Donald Trump in the future. Also,
but
I'm coming to your question. Yes, I'm coming to your
you
question. I'm just
foresee
trying to give a quick background. But for the impeachment, it's very interesting too. Like you said in your introduction, it's going to be for the first time that the president will be impeached twice if he's actually impeached. I see the Democrats going ahead, but I don't see them pulling through, just like in the first instance, because 1 week, a little over 1 week or so, 5 working days, then maybe 6 working days from Monday to the next Monday, 6 working days effectively. So I don't see them pulling this through. Yes, even if Nancy Pelosi's House of Representatives succeeds in pushing it in the House of Representatives, I see another blockade. I see the Senate blocking it just like they did in the first instance. Don't forget that Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, but a lot of senators are actually angry from the Republican Party.
But they're not. I don't see them.
Could do all of
but they won't
this
bring that. I don't see them bringing that complete embarrassment on the Republican president. Mitch
Is it about the
McConnell.
Republican Party or the American democracy, America as a nation?
Yeah, they we know they are exemplars of patriotism, of nationalism. But even then, I don't see them, allowing their party to be ridiculed to no end, really, because do not forget that they have.
Could actually, overcome patriotism in this instance.
Yeah, there are people that believe so much in party affiliation. They already been rubbish in Georgia. They've already lost the legislature. So I'm not sure. I don't think they will permit continuous humiliation of their party. They know that Donald Trump was an outlier. He has brought the party almost to disrepute. So the onus is now on them now to repair it. But in trying to repair the damage done by Donald Trump, I think they will realize that there's a time to start, and they probably not want a Republican president to be to go into the Hall of Infamy as the first president to be impeached twice.
Now let's talk about the entire 4 years of Trump presidency. He has boasted that he actually brought economic progress and all of that, and he achieved certain things and all of that, policies, unifying Arab countries, especially in the Middle East with Israel and all of that, counting those things as his successes. But if you flip it the other way, lots of people have just said that Trump's 4-year presidency is nothing other than the apprentice White House edition. What do you make of that?
Yeah, largely so, really. But if not for COVID-19, and if not for his own intransigence in some respects, in terms of disrespect from some, he's been disrespectful of some historical accords, and most particularly some of his domestic policies, he will probably have given Biden a much more difficult time, than we saw happened. Because in terms of economy, the U.S. economy was robust. Before COVID-19 came, it was just COVID-19 that came and shattered everything, created a whole lot of unemployment. Getting to at a time about 40 million people unemployed. But even in the build-up to the election, people were already getting employed. So in the economic sector, it didn't do too badly. In foreign relations, of course, foreign affairs does not determine, the election of a U.S. president anyway.
It used to be in the past.
Yeah, the global community didn't really fancy him,
down.
but it wasn't going to matter. This is a man who came out with about 73 million people voting for him. So he did very well at some levels, despite the fact that he's a maverick, he's almost narcissistic in some of his approach to issues, but again, going forward, I don't see another Donald Trump being allowed to emerge in the politics of America. I see some policies being put in place to checkmate his kind in the future.
These are very difficult times for America as a nation to actually sell its concept of democracy to the world again. What lessons do you think African countries have learned from all of this? And should we now look towards Russia for its own system of government, or maybe China and no longer the US
absolutely.
and some Western countries?
I'm not going to agree with you, because this is just an outlier. And you could see they brought about redemption. He wanted to prevent the validation of the vote in the legislature. But yes, despite the 3-hour delay, it happened eventually. They were embarrassed themselves. It didn't take anything away. In some other countries, Donald Trump will have succeeded, but because of the strength of the institution that prevented him from succeeding. So against that background, you can still give them credit. It means that they are very solid. It's a very solid democracy. In some weaker democracy, a strong character like Donald Trump will have succeeded in pushing the institutions to its limit and probably get people arrested, silence people.
Yeah, I mean, someone was saying the other day on my show that he wouldn't have been begging the other guy. He would have just arrested him and locked him up.
So to that extent, you still
the
give that
Secretary of State.
So to that extent, you still give that system credits and hope that in Africa we can learn, we can learn and think about building our own institutions to be as strong as what we witness, what institutions in the United States actually are. Because institutions are actually foundations of good governance and development, as the case could be somehow.
Now, as we try to round off this conversation, let's talk about the role of his Vice President, Mike Pence, and the role he played. Do you foresee maybe a Nigerian Vice President actually playing that kind of role if we have a similar situation here? Yeah, but sticking to the Constitution, irrespective of what your president wants you to do.
I think he tried in terms of finding an equilibrium between, not being disrespectful of Donald Trump, who appointed him, being loyal to him, and of course being even more loyal to the Constitution of his country. So that was a very good, difficult position that he found himself, despite the pressure from Donald Trump. He stood his ground.
It almost led to a threat of life.
That's right. Despite the pressure and all of that, he stood his ground, and ensured that the good, he followed the laid down procedures and actualized it at the end of the day. But in Nigeria, we cannot say it's impossible. But of course, we are not actually guided by policies and procedures, by rules, by ethics, by morals. We're rather guided by the tendency and the temptation to pander to classifiers like ethnicity, religion, and even material things. We are easily swayed, by people's war chests, and that's the unfortunate aspect of that's our own downside.
Yeah, and
but
I want to wonder,
away from
do you think that the institutions of state can even protect someone like that if he decides to do what the Constitution says and not what the president wants him to do, or the handlers of Mr. President wants him to do? If an Oshibanjo does that, do you think that the institutions of state would protect him?
I'm not sure our institutions are that strong yet, Sumner, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and how do we build such institutions?
We need to strengthen them, but we do know that
because it's something the Constitution says that the Vice President should do.
But the
and he's about to do it, but his president is asking him not to do it.
But the irony is that it takes individuals to strengthen institutions. But we haven't had individuals with that strong political will to build those institutions. When individuals build those institutions, the institutions will now come out to protect not just that individual, but the generality of the people. But we have lacked, individuals with that political will, with that strength of character, to be concerned about building the institution because of the tendency to privilege self-interest over the interest of the public.
Abiodun Adeniyi, Arise News analyst. It's been nice having you here. And we hope the Nigerian politicians will listen, and then we will have them respecting the laws of the land when it's time for them to actually do what's needful and constitutional. Well, that's how it's been on this edition of the Arise of this week. And we hope to have you with us some other time. Thanks so much from me here and my colleagues in Abuja. It's goodbye from Abuja.